Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear students, today we are going to start with the last chapter, chapter number 10, Disaster Management. And in this chapter, we are going to discuss about disaster, types of disaster, effect of disaster, impact of disaster, disaster management, the nature and extent of disaster, first aid and emergency action mock drill. So these are the topics which we are going to discuss. So let us start with what is disaster. So if we talk about variously dangerous events occurring many times in the environment, those are called disaster. So uncontrolled events which take place in our environment, in our surroundings, which we have no control on, those are called as disaster, and those are dangerous in nature. Some of them are natural disaster like floods, wet and dry famine, cyclones, earthquakes, volcanoes, etc. These are all of a sudden to the mankind. Such events cause sudden changes in the environment and thereby cause the damage to it. Environment is also damaged due to use of natural resources for development. This leads to sudden disasters unexpected to human. This can be called as man-made disasters. So there are natural disasters like earthquake, volcanoes, flood, and these are sudden changes which taking place in the environment. And then there are certain disasters which are man-made, okay, like riots. Okay, so these are man-made disasters. United Nations has defined the disaster as a sudden event that leads to the huge loss of life and property. So huge event or sudden, these are important in the definition. As the disaster occurs suddenly, it cannot be predicted. Hence, precautions are not possible. So here, huge losses due to the property occur in area of disaster. There are long-term effects on society due to incidents of life and property loss. Various areas of life like economic, social, cultural, political, law administration are affected by it. The life in the area of disaster disturbs totally. There is loss to life and property to the people in disaster. Earlier, we have studied various types of disasters and the measures to be taken. None of the different disasters are similar. Period of each disaster is not same. Some disasters are short term, whereas some are long term. So disasters are of various types. Some are of short period and some are of long period. Reason behind each disaster are also different. Depending upon the nature of disaster, it can be determined that which component of the environment will be affected more. So these are different disasters aspects one need to understand. Now, in the last standard, we have studied the effects of various types of disasters and the precautionary measures to be taken in any case disaster happens. We can classify the disasters in the other ways too, like catastrophic disaster, like cyclones in Odisha, catastrophic earthquakes of Gujarat and Latur, frequently buzzing cyclones in coastal Andhra Pradesh, which lead to total chaos, huge loss of life and property in respective region. However, irrespective of this, life has always returned to normal within short time. disasters making the impact for long duration are those whose after effects are either severe or severity increases with time. Example famine, various problems of crop, strikes of workers, rising levels of ocean, desertification, etc. So these are some examples of disasters. Now this part internet my friend, let's discuss this all are eliminated. Okay. Now see here this tree diagram, types of disaster. So here it's geophysical, biological, man-made. Geological, geophysical is further divided as geological, atmospheric, and the examples are given here. Biological is further divided as plant, animal, the examples are given here. Man-made, again further divided as unknown, international, okay, and the examples are given. So this is how the disaster of different types. Now what are the effects of disaster? So the effect, to understand the various serious effects of disaster with the help of above mentioned questions like collapsing of bridges, flooding of coastal villages, shortage of food are some of the problems of floods. Collapsing of houses, developing cracks in land are some of the effects of earthquake. Disasters like forest fire, drought are also adversely affect the environment. However, what is exact nature of this disaster? Whether there are any changes in nature before the occurrence of disaster, for how long the effects occur after the occurrence of disaster, it needs to be think all over these aspects. This helps us to understand the nature and gravity of disaster. Disasters definitely affect the economy of the nation. That effect is always relative to disaster and economy. If any port is destroyed, there are long lasting effects on economy due to huge expenses on its reconstruction. An effect of disaster on social leadership is that if local leadership is not strong enough, citizens become confused. It affects their participation in rescue and rehabilitation activities. Administrative problems arise during the disaster. If local governing bodies are affected by disasters, related departments cannot answer the problems of disaster efficiently. All the concerned departments are affected by disaster and thereby entire system collapses. So these are the effects of disaster. If at all the management of the local body cannot work efficiently, then the people get confused about their leadership. So these are the effects of disaster. Now this is a chart you are going to complete. Okay, very important. You are supposed to complete this. Okay. Now, nature and scope of disaster. So, taking into consideration the scope of disaster, some of the important facts must be thought over, like pre-disaster phase, warning phase, emergency phase, rehabilitation phase, recovery phase, reconstruction phase. So, these are the phases of management steps to be taken while carrying out the disasters management. Taking into consideration the nature and scope of disaster, only three aspects of disaster are important for common citizens, like phase of emergency. For citizens, these are the important aspects to be considered. Like phase of emergency, important character of this phase is that maximum lives can be saved by quick actions during this phase only. If we take quick action, okay, so maximum lives of the people, of the common citizen can be saved in this phase. Various actions like search and rescue operations, medical assistance, first aid, restoring communication services, removing the people from affected area are expected in this phase. Gravity of disaster can be estimated in this phase only. So this is a very important phase in disaster management. Phase of emergency, we can understand if the people are given timely assistance, so there the lives of the people can be saved, and we can understand the gravity of disaster in this phase only. Now second phase, transitional phase. So here rehabilitation work is started after the subsidation of any type of disaster. It includes clearing of debris, restoring water supply, repairing roads, so that it will be help to bring normalcy in public life. Rehabilitation of the victims is important aspect of this phase. Generally, different institutes offer the monetary and other type of help to such people. It helps to soothe the mental stress at the earliest. If these victims are offered with permanent mean of earning livelihood, and this is true rehabilitation. So in this phase, rehabilitation work is carried out, and as the disaster subsidence it get reduced to certain extent, people's life are brought to normalcy. Now how they do that? They do it by clearing of debris, restoring water supply, and then there are some institutes or there are some organizations which help them in economic way, that bring them to cool their, to soothe their mental stress, and this is actually a true rehabilitation. Now there comes the third one, reconstruction phase. So this is highly complicated phase. This phase begins in transitional phase. People reconstruct their buildings and facilities like roads and water supply. Farming practices are restarted. However, it takes long time for reconstruction. Planet Earth has experienced many natural disasters. Listening to the description of those disasters brings numbness to the mind. Most of the disasters are related unprecedented situations which have occurred in the Asian continent and region of Pacific Ocean. Huge loss of life and planet Earth has been occurred due to such disasters. Generally, such conditions of natural imbalance have been arisen due to greed of economic progress of human being. So this time or this phase, which is a very complicated phase, requires reconstruction of all those things which have lost in the disaster, maybe it farming practices or reconstructing the place where the people used to live. And planet Earth have faced many such disasters in the past, and there are some unprecedented situations which Earth, planet Earth in particular, Asian continent and the region of Pacific Ocean have suffered. So here this imbalance which create after the disaster has to be reconstructed, and this is mainly due to the economic progress which every country on the planet Earth wants to achieve. So here in recent or in reality, old problems of several years have become fierce. Increasing population, its increasing needs, emerging problems out of it are now at extreme end. Such disasters have been increased after the World War II. Conditions of instability arises in the country due to various reasons like economic inequality, racial and religious differences. Incidents like terrorism, abduction, social differences have been a routine now. So these problems which are man-made, like increasing population, the demands to be need, all these are more found to be after Second World War, and this led to the increase of instability in the countries, and particularly there where the racial and religious differences are more, and the terrorism, abduction, and social differences incident are found to be rising nowadays. Production and use of harmful chemicals is under ban in developed countries. However, production of either some of these chemicals, which can wipe out the human race, is common in developing and poor countries. So, these are certain reasons which are happening. So, here another such important threat to human being is from atomic energy plants. Radiations leaked occurred after the blast in atomic energy plant in Chernobyl, Russia. Its effects are still experienced in that region. This atomic energy plant was only used for electricity generation, and nowadays many countries are equipped with atomic energy. Out of this, risk of radiation leakage is increasing due to carelessness. Hence, importance of disaster management has become the foremost need of almost all the nations. In fact, it is most necessary for citizens of all countries because they are main sufferers in any type of disaster. Hence, direct participation of citizens is in disaster management is highly necessary. Similarly, disaster management schemes should be changed with respect to location, time, and nature of disaster. It should not be restricted for a particular period. Overall, there may be any type of disaster, it should be overcome. Concept of disaster management has been arisen out of this only. So here one need to understand that if it is the threat to human being after atomic energy plants development, it's a certain incident which took place all over the world, like the one took place in Russia and the one which took place in Japan. This led to increase in you know the risk of radiation leakage, and it's all due to carelessness. So one has to understand the importance of disaster management, how one can achieve disaster management. So in the next lecture we'll talk about disaster management. By the time you read this part, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.